If you are the president, and you and your campaign and your inaugural committee and your donors and your lawyers and your campaign staff and your longtime friends and associates keep finding themselves accused of felonies, or at least targeted or involved in serious criminal investigations, then if you're the president, the federal prosecutors you probably most have to worry about are three. Number one, the U.S. Attorney in Washington, D.C., where the nation's capital is, where lots of federal public corruption gets prosecuted, where lots of national security stuff gets handled. Second, New York. Even if you are not a president from New York, whose business is headquartered in New York like this one, if you and your marching order as president often find yourselves adjacent to criminal financial matters, well, the famously independent federal prosecutor's office in New York tends to find a way to take advantage of the fact that New York is the financial capital of the world. And so most crimes that involve money, aka most crimes, sometimes can somehow find their way into New York's federal jurisdiction. And that applies in the first instance to the federal prosecutor's office in the Southern District of New York in Manhattan. But the Eastern District of New York gets its beak wet on cases like that, too. So those are the three federal prosecutor's office. If you're a criminally adjacent president, those are the three federal prosecutor's offices you most have to worry about. Well, over just the last few months, the president's Attorney General William Barr has systematically decapitated all three of those federal prosecutor's offices, starting first with the prosecutor's office in Washington, D.C. He offered the U.S. attorney there a sort of a lateral move, pseudo-promotion elsewhere in the Trump administration. Then while that was pending, he went ahead and installed all his own guys in her office to take over and Bigfoot all the sensitive cases and investigations there that touched on the president's interests. Once he had installed those puppies in that office to do his work, he then yanked the offered new job to that U.S. attorney, yanked the job for which she had been that had been sort of dangled to her to entice her to leave that post. They yanked that job offer, got her out of there anyway, and formally installed Barr's own guys. Thereby, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington, D.C. was effectively neutralized. The premier federal public corruption prosecutors in the United States effectively neutered, tamed, put under the thumb of Attorney General William Barr, who has been not shy at all about bending the enforcement of American law to benefit the president and punish his enemies. Any threat to the president or his interests from the U.S. Attorney's Office in the District of Columbia has been over for months now. And, you know, even in the cases that already had gone through there, like the Mike Flynn case, for example, well, once Barr had his guys inserted into that office, they tried to retroactively drop the Flynn case even after his guilty pleas. That's still wending its way through the legal system. So that was first, the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office. Then it was SDNY, which is reportedly investigating things like the slush fund super sketchy Trump inaugural committee, which is also about to put Rudy Giuliani's guys, Lev and Igor, on trial, and which was busy not long ago sending out subpoenas by the boatload about Giuliani's own financial trail. Well, late on a Friday night, several weeks ago, Attorney General William Barr ham-handedly tried to force the U.S. attorney in SDNY to resign. Barr announced to the public that he was stuffing one of his own guys into that office. Instead, the U.S. attorney there, though, Geoffrey Berman, pushed back. He said, no, I'm not resigning. You are going to have to force me out if you want me out. And by the way, you're lying to the public about what's going on here, and I'm not letting you get away with it. That hard shove back from Geoffrey Berman, the U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York, it didn't succeed in keeping Berman in his job. They still forced him out. But it did succeed in keeping Bill Barr from installing his own puppy dog there, the way he did in D.C. What Jeff Berman's bravery and pushback did in SDNY is that it at least ensured that Berman's own deputy got to take over at that office to ensure some continuity. Still, though, Jeff Berman's out. So D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office, gone. Jeff Berman and SDNY, gone. Now tonight, it's the other one. It's the last one. The other U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of New York. Now, with this guy, Attorney General Bill Barr tried the same trick that he tried with the other two. In all three of these cases, he's offered these U.S. attorneys some sort of dubious, maybe possible promotion / lateral move. At least he's offered some other job in the Trump administration as a sort of enticement if they would just give up the U.S. Attorney's office and let Barr take over those offices for himself. Well, in the Eastern District of New York, the U.S. attorney there, Rich Donoghue, decided he would accept the dubious job offer from the Attorney General, the not-quite promotion, rather than stand up for himself and the independence of his office. Bill Barr initially put out word that it would be, this is no big deal, no cause for concern here, like there was so much concern expressed over the other U.S. attorneys' offices. Bill Barr initially announced that in EDNY, while Donoghue would be leaving, his deputy would be taking over the office once he left, as you're supposed to do in the normal course of events. But surprise, instead, tonight, late on Friday night, the Attorney General has announced that he is installing his own guy up in EDNY, just like he did in D.C., just like he tried to do in SDNY. His own hand-picked footman will be taking over the Eastern District of New York Federal Prosecutor's Office. Just months before the election, in the middle of, among other things, a reported investigation in that office into the president's inaugural committee and its alleged shenanigans. So, yeah. If it's Friday night, the Attorney General is advancing in what really does appear to be a quite systematic plan to end the independence of federal prosecutors' offices all over the country, at least the offices known to be investigating things related to the president and his interests. I mean, if you are this president, there are really three prosecutors' offices you had to worry about: D.C., SDNY, EDNY. Now, in short order, Bill Barr has decapitated them all. We hope you've enjoyed this experiment in being a rule of law country, but we've apparently decided that the experiment is over. It's not for us. So now we'll try whatever this is instead that we're living through. I'll also just say, keep in mind that this is the same Attorney General who has ordered the opening of federal criminal investigations into the Obama administration officials and law enforcement officials and intelligence officials who were involved in investigating Russia helping President Trump in the last election. It sort of slipped our mind because of the way our country has fallen into catastrophe since he did it. But Bill Barr has ordered criminal probes into Obama administration officials, law enforcement and intelligence officials who were involved in any of these investigations of the president. He has ordered criminal investigations of those people. When do you think he's going to want to bring those charges? And which prosecutors' offices do you think he'll use to do it?